the highest philosophy and the highest human emotion are the same at the experience level. The highest non-dualistic philosophy and the most sublime devotional philosophy are the same at the experience level. Now, experience level is the most sublime, is the very peak of spiritual life. We begin with some external rituals as we start our education in the kindergarten. It is very important. Without kindergarten, there cannot be any kind of university education. So we have to start somewhere. Learning the alphabet is perhaps more important than writing a PhD thesis, because without learning the alphabet, you won't be able to do research. So at the grossest level, we have the rituals, external rituals, which Swami Vivekananda called the kindergarten of spiritual life. That's a term which he used in his own lectures on Bhakti Yoga. And above and beyond rituals, there is philosophy, doctrines and ideas which explain the meaning of human life, the nature of God, the mystery of creation, the mystery of life, and also the mystery of death, the mystery of after death also. All these are sometimes included in one section, philosophy, and from an academic point of view, theology cannot be separated from philosophy. All the great theologians were also great thinkers. Now, beyond rituals and philosophy and theology, there is what we call experience. And we become spiritual only when we reach this experience level. At the experience level, the highest jnanam we call the path of knowledge, the path of wisdom, the path of intellectual analysis, and the path of devotion are the same, but only at the highest level, the experience level. Now, if any of you may perhaps think that this is just this kind of sophistry or polemical oversimplification, if those of you can remember, you can read an important verse in the Bhagavad Gita. The verse begins like this: Maicha ananya yogena bhaktihi avibhijarini vivikta desha sevitum anabhirjana samsati. Those of you are interested, Maicha ananya yogena. The meaning is, the sloga, this verse in the Gita describes the nature of undiluted, pure love, pure bhakti, pure devotion. Whether it is the devotion of a Christian for Jesus, of Father in God, the devotion of a Jew for Jehovah, devotion of a Hindu for different deities, or even the devotion of a Buddhist for liberation, because Buddhism doesn't affirm the existence of a creator God. But even in Buddhism, Buddha insists on the human need for breaking off these chains that bind us to this world. We call nirvana or liberation. Now, this love for liberation, this love for the higher transcendental being, and the highest intellectual analysis are the same at the experience level. Now, in Shankaracharya's commentary on this verse, Shankaracharya gives a graphic description of the nature of pure love. He says, what is pure love? So he uses certain Sanskrit adjectives like achala, Avyabhicharini, which means unwavering, no wavering, steady, steadfast, one-sided, focused devotion to a God in any religious tradition. And the path of knowledge and wisdom are the same. This is the view that comes from the greatest exponent of non-dualistic philosophy. And he was also the writer of the most sublime devotional poetry, Saundarya Lahari, Ananda Lahari, Bhavani Ashtakam, etc. Some of these words are very simple. Gadistvam, Gadistvam, Tomeka, Bhavani. This is the last line of a series of verses with the great philosopher Saint wrote. Means, "Oh Mother, you are my only refuge." Now, the question arises, what are the special features of looking upon Mother, looking upon God as the Mother? I already stated at the very beginning, human contact, human relationship with God is nothing but a spiritualization or sublimation of human relationship. Now, what is the most sublime relationship that could exist between two human beings? Technically speaking, it is the relationship of mother with the child, and not necessarily the relation of child with the mother, not necessarily. It's a very interesting discussion. So Shankaracharya wrote that, see, Kuputro jayeta kumata na bhavati. There can be an ungrateful, a forgetful, a deviant son or daughter for that matter. But there can never be a mother who does not love her children. So, a mother's attitude, a mother's love, a mother's relationship with her children is perhaps the only unselfish human relationship that could exist. There would, in fact, in other forms of human relationships, there could be, not necessarily, but there is a possibility, at least in rare cases, there will be an element of selfishness. Maybe a father may expect the son or daughter to be a prominent person and do something in return. But a mother never expects anything other than the welfare, the joy, the happiness of her children. In fact, her happiness cannot be divorced, separated, cannot be even conceived of as distinct from the joy or happiness of her children. So this most sublime, unselfish human relationship is deified, it is elevated to the position of spiritual relationship. This is the psychological aspect of looking upon God as mother. Now, in ancient times, to give a historical background, in ancient times, during Vedic age in India, children used to be sent to Vedic hermitages for undergoing training in Vedic law. They used to spend 12 years in the hermitage. And at the end of their education, they used to go back to their homes. And when they returned to their homes, the teacher used to give some kind of instruction, something like a kind of convocation address. Though it's not so formal, but every student who returns home, most probably around 18th or 19th year, around that time, when he returned home, the teacher used to give some instruction. There are two sets of instructions. One set of instructions deal with the general philosophy of life. For example, you should speak the truth. You should never deviate from the path of truth. You should practice righteousness. You should never deviate from the path of righteousness. Satyam vada dharmam chara satya na pramadidavyam dharmat na pramadidavyam. This is the Sanskrit original form, which means you should stick to truth. You should never deviate from truth. And you should stick to righteousness, what is right, and should never do something that is wrong. Now after this is philosophical aspect of life. Then after this, the teacher turns to the family setting. And how, that means the teacher teaches the student as to how he should become an ideal son or a daughter, how he or she should become an ideal member of society, a responsible citizen of the country, and so on. There, the first instruction is, you should respect and honor your mother as much as you honor God Himself. This is the Matrudevo Bhava, the first instruction. Then only Pitrudevo Bhava. I mean, you should respect your father, you respect your guest, and also your teacher. Acharya Devo Bhava, Aditi Devo Bhava. What I am focusing on is the first instruction, Matrudevo Bhava. Because it is the women folk who actually determine the culture of a family and eventually the culture of a society and also a nation. Because the child doesn't learn from mother, the child imbibes from mother. And what you imbibe becomes your character. What you learn, you may forget. Philosophy and psychology and languages which people learn in their universities, they may perhaps forget. But what a child imbibes by seeing the face of his or her mother, it may never forget. So the first instruction is Matrudevo Bhava. If you look upon our own society, you find in societies where this motherhood of women folk is respected and honored, the society becomes culturally and emotionally healthy. Women should not try to be men, and men should not try to be women. Women have their own unique spiritual characteristics, which men folk can never have. So in Vedantic tradition, the first instruction that a child receives, and in fact, the criterion by which a citizen or a member of a family is judged or his character is decided is the respect and the honor that the child, whether son or daughter, gives to her or his mother. Incidentally, you find, if you look at the lives of great people whom humanity remembers, people whose stature grows with the passing of centuries. There are some people whose stature goes down with the passing of centuries. They get more and more forgotten, but there are some unique great spiritual persons, not necessarily spiritual persons, people who have made a name in their life, whose stature grows with the passing of time. Behind these great men, there was a loving mother. I am not giving you a list of spiritual teachers because we take for granted that spiritual teachers normally do have these characteristics. Where Shankaracharya comes to his mother's deathbed and gives her spiritual instructions before the lady passed away. Swami Vivekananda, after becoming the great prophet that he was, never forgot his obligation to his mother. Sri Ramakrishna, the man who was always in a kind of transcendental samadhi experience. Sri Ramakrishna was the God man of the 19th century, for whom God alone existed, nothing else existed. But there was one person whom he never forgot, his own mother. Why may I mention another name, a most unlikely person, Napoleon, the great military hero. He was trained to be what he later became, a man of iron will, steady wisdom. There are many people who don't like him, that's a different matter. But even Vivekananda himself had some admiration for Napoleon, so for some of his unique characteristics and qualities. See, Napoleonic code, Napoleonic method of administration, his idea of unification of the world, not in military matters. So, apart from the bloody wars that we fought with the Prussians or the British and others, you have to remember there was a great man behind this military conqueror, Napoleon. And that Napoleon was trained to be what he became by his mother. So, behind many of the great personalities, not necessarily philosophers and spiritual personalities, there was always the figure, the looming figure, not always visible, and in some cases very visible, of a loving mother. So in fact, looking upon God as mother relieves us a lot of burdens, because before mother we all become informal, we feel freedom, we feel we can unburden our problems and worries. That's why in the famous devotional work which is known as Chandi, which is read often in Durga Puja and other important spiritual occasions, mother looked upon as God is described as Bhukti, Mukti, Pradayini. Say, very important. Bhukti, Mukti, Pradayini. Bhukti means enjoyment. Mukti means spiritual liberation. So very often there's a feeling among some devotees, well, we should not ask for any help in material life when we pray. But to mother you can even pray for material help. A poor man can ask for prosperity. A person who fails in his or her life can ask for help. Because mother is the one person before whom the child need not hide anything. So God looked upon mother as so compassionate that he won't mind or she won't mind even if her children ask for some little help. At the highest mystical level, you find it is not very good to ask for anything material. But when you look upon God as mother, you can ask for anything. That is, Bhukti Pradayini means mother who gives you help. Bhukti means enjoyment. There are people, you tell them about transcendental liberation, freedom from the tyranny of senses. You talk to them about the perishable nature of material enjoyments, where they will run away. Because they are in need of something else. It's like teaching high philosophy to kindergarten children. They will run away from the classrooms. You have to teach them how to play. You have to show before them some tiny toys, small mobile vehicles where they can ride. You have to give them candies, chocolates. You can't teach them Kant and Hegel and Advaita. You can't do that. They will run away. So small children, at the beginning of their spiritual life, do need some little enjoyments. And mother gives that also to her children. But when the children throw away all these toys, I don't want these things, I want something, then mother gives that also. You find in Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna puts these things in a very humorous language. He says, Well, there are some devotees who are very happy with some material enjoyment. So money, wealth, status, great name, big business, success in business, becoming high official in the government. That's what they want. And mother gives that. If those children are sincere, mother gives that. And mother keeps away. She may be engaged in some other household responsibilities, housekeeping work. But when the children throw away all these candies and chocolates and toys and then start crying to mother, then mother stops all her work and rushes to children. But before that, the mother doesn't tell the children, you should not have any desire for candies or chocolates. Mother knows that children enjoy them, so mother gives them. Similarly, that's why Bhukti Pradayini, in the Chanti, in the Durga Saptashati, sometimes it is called. There is a famous, that it means. The other is Mukti Pradayini, means the one who gives liberation. Those who are fed up with things of this world, who are not interested in any kind of enjoyment, mother also opens the door for transcendental spiritual liberation. So that is the uniqueness of looking upon God as mother. Now, you find Swami Vivekananda quotes a very important verse from an ancient Sanskrit classic in his Chicago address. In fact, a very central theme of his first inaugural address is depicted in this verse. I shall read this and I shall interpret. The verse is this: Trayi Sankhya Yoga Pasipadimadam Vaishnavamiti Prabhinne Prasthane Paramidamada Pathimiti Cha Ruchinam Vaichitriyad Ruju Kutila Nana Pathajusham Nranameko Gamyastumasi Payasam Arnava Iva. This is the verse. It comes from an ancient Sanskrit work which is called Shiva Mahimna Stotram. The meaning is this: different parts are laid down by different scriptures, different traditions, different religious, spiritual, cultural traditions. Now, of these different parts, people accept the path which they consider to be suitable to them. Whatever path they accept, if they are sincere and honest and pure-hearted, they will reach the goal. Now, among these various paths, the highest and the most sublime and much more important, the easiest path is the path of devotion. Even in the path of devotion, there are different paths, different ways, different approaches. Among them, the easiest path is to look upon God as mother of the universe. Because if you look upon God as the mother, on the one hand you feel the touch of a protecting mother behind. On the other hand, you also realize not only you but other members of creation, not only human beings, whole creation, also are children of mother. So on the one hand, you feel peace and harmony within. On the other hand, you feel like being compassionate, broad-minded, and sympathetic towards your fellow beings. Now, this is exactly the experience which comes to the highest spiritual seeker who takes to the path of wisdom or knowledge, what we call Jnana Yoga or non-dualistic philosophy. In non-dualistic path, we realize the presence of the Lord within us. We also realize that Lord, that Brahman or Atman or consciousness, to be the all-pervading reality. So within us we feel that we are something beyond these psychophysical mechanisms. And this attitude also enables us to realize the presence of the same Lord in the whole creation. So, while enjoying peace and harmony within, it also makes us better human beings. Maybe one of the most classical illustrations of looking upon God as Mother could be found in the life of Holy Mother Sri Sharada Devi herself. If you read the Gospel of Holy Mother, or if you read any of these books which contain Mother's instructions, you'll find a very balanced, a very, I would say, rational approach in spiritual life. On the one hand, Mother insists that we must work hard, we must practice, we must continue spiritual practices with devotion and concentration. We should never deviate from our routine in spiritual life. On the other hand, Mother also tells us that just because we practice, we do some spiritual practices, we have no claim to spiritual progress, because ultimately everything is in the hands of God. So you find a reconciliation between the ideal of human effort and also the ideal of divine grace. These are two fundamental topics, themes, which are discussed in the spiritual classics of most of the famous Christian mystical works, and also in Vedantic devotional tradition, Narada Bhakti Sutras, Chandilya Bhakti Sutras, Bhagavata Purana, and also in the writings of St. Teresa of Avila, Philokalia, Brother Lawrence, and so on. In all these devotional books you find, especially an autobiographical touch, a subjective approach, very often asking oneself how far we have gone, what effort we have made, and what is the role of my effort, and to what extent I can guarantee spiritual progress by my effort, and how can I be sure that I will get the grace of God. So these topics are discussed. Very often there are also conflicting ideas. There's certain like inner warfare. These are much more intense in discussing the apparent conflict between human effort and divine grace. Now, Mother says that one can never forget or ignore or neglect the importance of human effort, because it is human effort that makes us spiritually fit to receive and appreciate and make proper use of God's blessings, God's grace. If we don't make any human effort, if we don't practice spiritual sadhana, spiritual practices, and if God appears before us, we may not recognize Him as God. We may recognize Him maybe somebody who has just come to listen to our lectures. On the other hand, when a devotee undergoes intense spiritual practice, when he develops high concentration, purity of mind, simplicity and purity of mind, and then when the devotee gets some inner experience, the devotee understands that the importance of divine grace. I have just mentioned this earlier, but I shall try to mention once more. Maybe this reconciliation can be found in the works of Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and also in the works of Saint Teresa of Avila. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna gives different examples. See, suppose you are sitting on one bank of the river and you want to cross the river. There's a bond that is tied to the anchor. Now, if you just sit on the bank of the river and go on wishing or shouting that you want to cross the river, you won't be able to cross the river. Even if the current, the tide is favorable, if you just sit on one bank of the river without making any effort to untie the boat and then try to reach the midstream so that you can make proper use of the favorable current, you will never reach the other bank of the river. So what you need to do first is you to untie the anchor, untie the boat, make it free. Then you have to row for some time for some distance till you reach the midstream, so that you can make proper use of the wind that is blowing, the favorable tide or current, so that you can reach the other bank. Now the effort involved in untying the anchor, in freeing the boat from the chains, and the effort involved in rowing it to the midstream corresponds to human effort. Without this human effort involved, we won't be able to make any use of the favorable wind that is blowing. In another context, there is another illustration. The example, you can find the life of one of Sri Ramakrishna's well-known disciples, Swami Brahmananda ji. He was considered to be a highly elevated soul. Was always in a state of samadhi. But he was still practicing the normal spiritual practices which beginners undergo. So when somebody asked him, Maharaj, that's how they used to address him, why are you so intensely engaged in spiritual practices, though you are such a highly evolved soul? The answer, you have got everything from your Guru, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa himself. So Swami Brahmananda ji replied, well, Guru Maharaj, his teacher, Sri Ramakrishna, had given him everything. But what he has given, I should be able to bear, I should be able to receive. To be able to receive the grace of God, you have to make your own effort. That's what Mother says. Mother goes on stressing this idea again and again in her innumerable teachings. Now, if you read the works of centuries of Avila, you may find the same idea but coming from a different cultural, geographical setting. She gives the illustration of a farmer. A farmer wants to irrigate the land of his own heart. That's the view of the interpreters, the commentators on the teachings of Saint Teresa. Now the land is barren. It is full of thorns, stones, pebbles. So even if it starts raining, that land won't be very suitable for sowing the seed. So the farmer first has to remove the weeds, remove the grass, remove the pebbles and stones and thorns before he sows the seed. And now, after removing all this, when the field is ready, the farmer has to work hard. Maybe in those days, they had to bring water from the water mill, which involves a lot of human effort, or may have to bring water from the nearby well, may have to cut a canal and bring water from the nearby stream or river. So all these involve a lot of human effort. And then also, even if the field is ready, if all the weeds and pebbles and stones are removed, still this human effort alone won't be the best way of irrigating the field. There is a much better and much more effective way of irrigating the field if it starts raining. Suppose the field is ready, and if it starts raining, then the field will be extremely well irrigated, and if he sows the seed, it will be like the parable, like the best field mentioned in the parable of sower of the seed in the Bible. the farmer will get a very good yield. But suppose it starts raining before the field is ready, when the field is full of weeds and grass and all kinds of wild growth, then maybe the weeds and wild growth will grow much better than the seed that he plants. So he won't get any good yield. So before he sows the seeds, or before he gets the rains, the grace of God. So the rains here corresponds to the grace of God. So grace of God will be useful to a spiritual seeker only if the spiritual seeker makes himself mentally fit, spiritually fit to receive it. The field should be made ready before the grace of God comes in the form of rains. That's the idea behind. Now, this idea is mentioned again and again in all the important spiritual classics in which God is looked upon as the Divine Mother herself. Now, there is a famous verse which I would like to read now, which is a graphic description of what happens to a spiritual seeker who looks upon God as a mother. The spiritual seeker is able to spiritualize the totality of his life. Very often, at least for the beginners, there is always a distinction between secular life and spiritual life. We spend 2 hours in the puja room or meditation room or in the church or a temple or any place of worship for the matter, engaging in ritualistic, mechanical forms of spiritual practices. And then we come out of the meditation room or the church or a temple, we feel now quite free, now I can work hard. Again, next day morning, I can practice, I can do spiritual practice. So there is always a kind of regimentation, a kind of a line of demarcation between the secular and the spiritual, between spiritual practices and the rest of our normal human activities. Now, this is all right. Just as a kindergarten is all right for a child who wants education, or a primary school is a necessity for anybody who wants education. But nobody should want to continue permanently in the kindergarten or the primary school. So we must come out of the kindergarten of spiritual life, or the primary school of spiritual life. When we come out of that, this line of demarcation between the secular and spiritual vanishes. All activities become spiritual, because there is no activity which can be demarcated as secular, as distinct from spiritual. This idea is brought out in one of the most celebrated verses by Shankaracharya, mind you, the greatest philosopher of non-dualistic philosophy, who taught that God in his highest form is one immanent, omnipresent, transcendental reality, devoid of names and forms. The great philosopher who depicted God, who said the highest idea of God is one formless, nameless, attributeless, omnipresent, transcendental, immanent reality. Swami Vivekananda also expounded the same idea in his Jnana Yoga lectures. In most of his lectures, Swamiji, especially the lectures which Swamiji gave in Western Hemisphere, Swamiji presented this non-dualistic interpretation of Godhead. Okay. Now, in this verse, Shankaracharya says that a spiritual seeker who looks upon God as the Divine Mother can convert every moment in his or her life into a spiritual sadhana, spiritual practice. The verse is this, which I shall read and translate. Atmatum girijamatihi sakajara prana shariram griham pujate vishyoba bhogarajana nidra samadhi sthitihi sanchara padayuhu pradakshana vidhi stotrani sarva giro yadyat karma karomi tattad akhilam shambhu tavaradhanam. This is a verse. The verse is attributed, in this verse it is addressed to Lord Shiva, but in other hymns addressed to Mother like Saundari Lahari, Ananda Lahari, Chadushashti Upajara Puja Stotram, Bhavani Ashtakam, innumerable hymns addressed to Divine Mother, he repeats the same idea. But this happens to be the most picturesque verse, that's why I am quoting this. The prayer is this. You are my inner essence. Myself, that's what you are. I compare my mind to the Divine Mother. My vital airs, the energy, my breathing, I compare to your followers. And what is the place where I install your image? My body is your temple. So the body becomes temple, and the vital airs, which are an integral part of our existence, become your devotees. And my inner essence is yourself. And what about the enjoyments that I undergo, food that I eat, the recreation, my movements, whatever I enjoy are the flowers that I place at your feet, my offerings to your feet. And what about my sleep? My sleep is complete absorption in you. And what about my wanderings? I go from place to place, I walk, I travel. All my movements, all my travels are circumambulations. I am going around you. I am going around you. Whatever movement I undertake, my wanderings are circumambulations, because you are everywhere. So vital airs are your followers. My own body is your temple, the place where you reside. And whatever enjoyments that you give me are my own offerings, the flowers that I place at your feet. And whatever I speak are my prayers to you. So whatever we think, act, do, speak, including breathing, wanderings, all these are nothing but my offerings to you. So the thin line of demarcation between secular and spiritual vanishes. Secular merges into spiritual. Whole life becomes a spiritual practice. Every word becomes a prayer. Every act, every movement becomes an act of worship, because you are residing within me. If a devotee can accept and practice this approach to the divine, then one can lead a happy life in this world without becoming worldly minded. One can live in this world, still one can avoid worldly mindedness. This is a unique feature of looking upon God as the Divine Mother of the whole creation. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.